All right, welcome into another day of your daily Devo. I'm Pastor Rick, and we are continuing our journey through the book of Galatians, and we have made it successfully into chapter 4. So that means we're about 50% of the way done with the book of Galatians, just making good, steady progress. So keep up the good work. Give yourself a pat on the back. And so here we're going to jump into chapter 4. I think we're going to take probably this chapter in 3 pieces. So I think we're going to be like verses 1 through about 7 today, and then take the middle chunk tomorrow, and then the day after that we'll finish off the chapter. So if you're reading ahead, that's the parts you can kind of focus on. And here we go. Chapter 4, verse 1. Now I say that as long as the heir is a child, he differs in no way from a slave, though he is the owner of everything. Instead, he's under guardians and trustees until the time set by his father. In the same way, we also, when we were children, were in slavery under the elements of the world. When the time came to completion, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. So let's go ahead and highlight that. That's good stuff right there. And pull up a random screen there. It's always fun. All right. When the time came to completion, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Though when the time came to completion, that means like before Christ came, when they were in the garden and sin happened, and then all of the evil, and then the flood, and then all of the years of slavery for the children of Israel. You just go through the entire history leading up to the time where Christ came. And the resounding message of Scripture is that God knew what was going on. He was in control. He was working the plan. And I think that that's a pretty important thing to remind ourselves about in the craziness of life, when things are just different than we would have done it if we were the ones in control, is to say, you know what, God's got this. He's in control. He knows what's happening. And when it comes to this statement about when the time came to completion, when Christ came, there were a few things kind of in place that made his arrival at basically the best time ever in recorded history up until that point. The Romans were in charge, and the Romans had been busy. There was kind of an overall language in that part of, basically in most of the world, so almost everybody spoke Greek, and so it was kind of like a little bit like English today, how lots of different countries, kind of use English as kind of a go-to language for commonality. And so they had a little bit of the same kind of dynamic in that regard, where tons and tons of people all over the world spoke Greek. And so there was basically a one common language thing going on. They also had, what's called the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, where they had established safe and secure travel. It was far less deadly to travel and to go places and to do things in this time period. And then also we have what's called the Roman roads, right? So the Romans had made roads all over the place, making travel also more secure, easier, more manageable. So as far as Jesus coming into a time in the world where spreading the gospel could actually work, this was the time. And so that's where it says, when the time came to completion, God sent his Son. And I can tell you, there are plenty of times, I am sure, throughout the Old Testament, where the Israelites were like, what in the world, God? What is the holdup? What is the problem? Where are you, and what are you doing? And so, I think it's okay. It's okay for us to feel that way sometimes, because His ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts, and they're far above us. So it's okay for there to be some misunderstanding, for there to be some lack of clarity, but ultimately to fight through the feelings and get to the anchor point that we're going to stay. And that anchor point essentially is, God, I trust you. I believe in you. You're good. You do good. I'm going to lean into you. I'm going to believe that you've got this and that I don't need to worry about what's going on. And so when the time came to completion, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law. He came to redeem you, to buy you back. Because when we entered into this sin arrangement, then we were literally like owing. So it wasn't just like walk in, open the door, let you out. No, it was a price had to be paid. Redemption had to happen. So he came to redeem those under the law so that we might receive adoption as sons. So he didn't just deliver someone else's slaves to become his slaves. There would have been some graciousness just in that, to be quite honest, because he's good and he does good, because he's kind and loving and compassionate, and he's not seeking whom he may devour, seeking to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Even if that is all God had arranged for us, was to go from being slaves of sin to slaves of God, significant upgrade. However, God didn't see fit to do that as his base work here. He redeemed those under the law to receive adoption as sons. So we're talking, prodigal son returning, getting a robe, indicating his authority and his position in the family. He got sandals, indicating his freedom, his ability to move about the cabin, like the captain has turned off the seatbelt light, the fasten seatbelt light, and you are now free to move about the cabin. That's kind of the shoes. Getting shoes represented the freedom, to be able to walk other places and not obviously hurt your feet and stuff. But so being adopted in as sons, not just, and also then the ring that they would get on their finger representing the authority of the Father. Excuse me. So you get the position, the authority, and the freedom of being a son, not just being a servant. And why? We didn't do anything to deserve that. Excuse me. We didn't do anything to deserve any of that. We didn't, just again, like the prodigal son, if we could have simply returned to the Father's house and found ourselves as slaves, that would have been a blessing. That would have been an upgrade. But instead, God brings us in, adopting us as sons, giving us position, giving us authority, and giving us freedom, and giving us inheritance. Come on now, let's not forget about inheritance, because as a slave, you'd get nothing, but as a son, you get everything. And because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. And that's that relationship with God that he wants us to have. Dad, my daddy. Abba, Father. Dad. That relationship. That's what that word means, is relationship. So, you know how people grow up and people call their dads different things. And so I had friends that called their dad Papa growing up, and I just couldn't handle it. I don't know why, but it just felt weird. And so I could never do it, and I didn't understand it. And so that word doesn't mean anything to me, right? It just means weird to me. I can't handle it. So for me, just the word dad, that's how I've always referred to my dad. It's just Dad, hey Dad, and that hey Dad comment is significant of relationship. Like, it's drawing on everything that we have together, the security I have in my dad's love for me and his care for me and his sacrifice for me, and that's where these last two verses of our time together today are so significant, because you are sons, and God sent the Spirit of His Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father, actually putting in us the desire to call God Dad. Hey, Dad. Because, and I think it's significant that He had to send the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying that, because He knew we would not default that way. We default to legalism. We default to rules and following rules and checking boxes and self-righteously, like earning our place. Like that's kind of like the go-to, the default setting that we come with is to default towards rules and performance and that kind of thing. But He's like, no, I'm going to deliver you from that, because you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then God has made you an heir. Like, understand all that you're coming into access to. And so, like, one of the big points for today is to think about the relationship. Think about the hey dad part of your relationship with God, because and obeying and doing what God wants really needs to flow from a heart full of love and relationship to God. Now, I do believe in the fear of God. Yes, absolutely, 100%. So it's okay to have like fear of consequence in your life. So, if you do that, that's going to go bad for you and you don't want to upset. But I mean, it's like with my wife, I don't keep the quote unquote rules of our relationship because I am afraid of her doing something to me, but it's because I don't want to hurt the relationship. I don't want to degrade what we have. I certainly don't want to lose what we have. And it just flows from my love and care and concern for who she is. It's not a drudgery. It's not like, it just flows, like thinking about her and trying to do nice things for her and to treat her well flows from my heart. And that's the kind of thing God has invited us into, is relationship with Him. To cry out, hey Dad, my Father, that know that we are no longer slaves, but we are sons and then made heirs. And man, take some time today to just meditate on these truths, that He has made you a son, no longer a slave. And then with that sonship comes being an heir. So there's an inheritance involved. But knowing that God seeks relationship with us and not just rules. And so if you think about a parent and how they treat their kids and why the parent has rules, why the parent guides and directs their behavior, is because the parent knows, in order to really flourish in life, I need to instill these values in you. I need to instill these principles in you. And so God, being a loving Father, wants to change our hearts from the inside out so that we behave in such a way that our lives will flourish and that His kingdom will be extended. So with that, I hope you are encouraged and strengthened today. God bless you. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.